The rain hammered against my windshield like angry fists, each drop a tiny explosion in the beam of my dying headlights. Steam rose from under the hood of my second-hand Honda, joining the curtain of water that isolated me from the world. I was stranded on a deserted stretch of road, somewhere between desperation and nowhere. "Come on, please," I whispered, turning the key again. The engine made a horrible grinding sound before falling silent. Dead, just like everything else in my life lately. I let my forehead rest against the steering wheel, exhaustion settling into my bones. 26 hours of work in 2 days. 2 jobs, barely enough money for rent, and now this. The car I'd scraped together every penny to buy had betrayed me 15 miles from home in the worst storm of the year. My phone showed no signal, its battery hovering at 12%. Perfect. Just perfect. I gathered what little courage remained and stepped out into the deluge. The rain immediately plastered my nurse's scrubs to my skin, the thin fabric offering no protection. My hair, which I'd carefully styled that morning in a desperate attempt to look presentable for my evening shift at the upscale restaurant, now hung in wet, stringy clumps around my face. The hood release jammed twice before finally giving way. I peered into the mechanical mess beneath, knowing full well I wouldn't recognize a problem if it jumped out and introduced itself. Steam hissed between gaps in the metal, and something smelled burnt. "Please, just give me this one break," I begged the inanimate object. As if it might take pity on me, it didn't. I slammed the hood down harder than necessary, tears mixing with raindrops on my cheeks. I was going to miss my second shift. I was going to lose that job. I was going to fail to make rent. Again, and Emma would suffer for it. The thought of my 4-year-old daughter waiting at my neighbor's apartment, expecting me to pick her up after my shift, broke something inside me. I leaned against the car and slid down until I was sitting on the wet asphalt, knees pulled to my chest, sobbing openly now. Through the sheets of rain and the blur of my tears, I didn't notice the approaching headlights until they were nearly upon me. 2 piercing beams cut through the darkness, followed by the low, powerful growl of an engine that didn't sputter or choke like mine. The vehicle, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, slowed and came to a stop about 20 feet from my pathetic breakdown. I hastily wiped my eyes, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was. A woman alone on a deserted road at night. Every warning my mother had ever given me flashed through my mind. The SUV's door opened, and a large umbrella emerged first, followed by a man. Even through the rain, I could tell this wasn't some good Samaritan in a family sedan. Everything about the vehicle screamed money and power. He approached slowly, his shoes, leather that probably cost more than my monthly rent, splashing through puddles. I couldn't make out his face yet, just the silhouette of broad shoulders under what appeared to be an expensive suit. "Car trouble?" His voice carried clearly through the downpour, deep and tinged with an accent I couldn't immediately place. Italian, maybe. I scrambled to my feet, embarrassed to be found crying on the ground. "It just died. I don't know what happened." As he drew closer, the streetlight caught his features, dark hair, slicked back from rain or product, I couldn't tell. A strong jaw shadowed with stubble. Eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. He was older than me, maybe late 30s, with the kind of face that had seen things, hard things, but hadn't been hardened by them entirely. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, stepping closer and extending the umbrella to shield me from the rain. I noticed then that his gesture had left him exposed to the downpour, his clearly expensive suit now darkening with water. Behind him, I saw another man had exited the SUV and was standing vigilantly beside it, seemingly unbothered by the rain soaking him. "I didn't exactly plan this," I said, a defensive edge to my voice. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Of course not." His eyes scanned my face, then my soaked scrubs. "Nurse?" I nodded, crossing my arms over my chest, suddenly aware of how the wet fabric clung to me. I was heading to my second job. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. 2 jobs? Bills don't pay themselves. The words came out more bitterly than I intended. He nodded slowly, as if processing this information. "What's your name?" I hesitated. Stranger danger had been drilled into me since childhood. but I was also alone with a dead car in a storm. Sophia. Sophia Mills. Sophia. He said my name carefully, as if tasting it. I'm Antonio Russo. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, with the expectation that it should, told me it probably meant something to most people. Let me help you, Sophia. Not a question. A statement. I don't need... Yes, you do. His directness startled me. You're stranded in a storm, at night, in a dangerous area, and you're crying. I wiped at my face again, mortified. I'm fine. Antonio Russo's expression didn't change, but something in those dark eyes softened almost imperceptibly. You're safe with me, he said, his voice lower now. I promise you that. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. There was something in the way he said it, like a man accustomed to people believing his promises, like a man whose promises were either blessings or threats, with no middle ground. Before I could respond, the man by the SUV called out something in Italian. Antonio responded in the same language, the words flowing with natural grace. My associate says there's no fixing your car tonight, he translated, turning back to me. You need a ride. I can call someone, I protested weakly, knowing it was a lie. I had no one to call. My parents were gone. My friends had slowly disappeared after Emma was born, and her father had vanished with my savings. I'd been too busy surviving to maintain relationships. Antonio raised an eyebrow, clearly seeing through me. In this storm, with that phone that you keep checking, I doubt it has any signal out here. I clutched my nearly dead phone tighter. I need to get to Mario's on 5th Street. I'm already late for my shift. The Italian place? He seemed amused by this. You work for Mario? You know it? Something like a smile crossed his face. You could say that. Behind him, the man by the SUV shifted his weight, scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. The movement drew my attention to a bulge beneath his jacket, the unmistakable outline of a gun. My heart stuttered. Who were these men? Antonio must have noticed my change in expression because he turned slightly, following my gaze. When he looked back, his face had hardened almost imperceptibly. Salvatore is my driver and security, he explained smoothly. In my position, certain precautions are necessary. Your position? I echoed, anxiety bubbling in my chest. Antonio studied me for a moment. I'm in business. Various enterprises. Import, export, real estate. Each term seemed carefully selected, revealing nothing. I should have run. I should have declined his help and taken my chances with the storm. But where would I go? I had a daughter waiting for me. I needed that job at Mario's. I needed to get through this night. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Russo, but... Antonio, he corrected. And this isn't an offer that makes sense to refuse, Sophia. You're soaked. Your car is dead. And you need to get to work. He gestured toward the luxurious SUV. I'm heading in that direction anyway. His logic was irrefutable, and yet something in me hesitated. Some primitive instinct sensing a predator, not necessarily one that would harm me, but dangerous nonetheless. A gust of wind drove the rain sideways, cutting through my wet scrubs like tiny needles. I shivered violently. Your daughter, Antonio said suddenly, would want you to make the practical choice. I froze. What? How did you... He gestured to my wrist, where a charm bracelet hung. A single charm, a tiny silver E, dangled from it. Initial jewelry, the way you touched it when you mentioned being late. A mother's gesture. The observation was both impressive and unsettling. This man noticed details. Thunder crashed overhead, making me jump. Antonio didn't flinch. Time to decide, Sophia. His tone remained gentle, but I sensed an undercurrent of steel. This was a man used to having his suggestions taken as commands. I looked at my dead car, then at the expensive SUV with its promise of warmth and rescue, then back at the inscrutable face of Antonio Russo. Which danger was greater, the known or the unknown? Okay, I finally said. Thank you. Something that might have been satisfaction flickered in his eyes. He guided me toward the vehicle, his hand hovering near, but not touching, the small of my back. As we approached, Salvatore opened the rear door with military precision. The interior was all black leather and soft lighting. It smelled of expensive cologne and something else. A subtle, masculine scent I couldn't name. "Your belongings?" Antonio asked, pausing before I got in. "Just my purse. It's in the car." He nodded to Salvatore, who moved with surprising speed to retrieve it. Within seconds, he returned with my worn faux leather bag, handling it as carefully as if it contained priceless treasures instead of drugstore makeup and a half-eaten granola bar. Inside the SUV, warmth enveloped me immediately. Antonio slid in beside me, leaving a respectable distance between us. Salvatore took the driver's seat, and soon we were gliding down the rain-slicked road. "Mario's, you said?" Antonio confirmed, reaching into a compartment and producing a soft cashmere throw. He offered it to me with a gesture that suggested refusal wasn't an option. I took it gratefully, wrapping it around my shoulders. "Yes, please. I'm already an hour late. You work as a nurse during the day and a waitress at night?" he asked, observing me with those penetrating eyes. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "Single mom. You do what you have to do." "And the father?" The directness of the question startled me. "Not in the picture. His choice or yours?" "His," I admitted. "He left when I was 7 months pregnant. Took our savings with him." Antonio's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Some men are unworthy of the title. The SUV slowed to a stop at a red light, and I watched raindrops race down the tinted window, wondering how I'd ended up discussing my failed relationship with a stranger in an expensive suit. "Thank you for the ride," I said, eager to change the subject. I'd be stuck there all night otherwise. "Sometimes," Antonio said, his eyes never leaving my face, "what seems like misfortune is actually fate." The light turned green, and we accelerated smoothly, the powerful engine purring beneath us. I noticed then that Salvatore wasn't taking the direct route to Mario's. "This isn't the way to the restaurant," I said, tension creeping back into my voice. "A slight detour," Antonio replied calmly. "There's flooding on Main Street. This route is safer." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me as we turned onto a street I didn't recognize. "Mr. Russo, Antonio, I really need to get to work. I can't afford to lose this job." He turned to me fully then, his expression unreadable. "You won't lose your job, Sophia. I can promise you that." There was that certainty again, that absolute confidence that his word was law. "How can you promise that?" I asked. A smile, small but genuine, curved his lips. "Because Mario is my cousin, and his restaurant sits on property I own." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Antonio Russo wasn't just some wealthy businessman. If he owned that building in that part of town, if Mario, known for his connections and his temper, was his cousin, I knew then, with absolute certainty, who I was sharing this car with. The whispers among the waitstaff suddenly made sense. The private room that was always reserved but rarely occupied. The way the kitchen staff snapped to attention when certain guests arrived. I was sitting next to a man who controlled half the city from the shadows. I stopped myself, unsure if naming what he was would be dangerous. "I'm a businessman, Sophia," he said softly, "with interests in many enterprises. That's all you need to know for now." For now? The implication that there would be more, that this encounter wasn't just a random act of kindness on a stormy night, sent another shiver through me. The SUV turned onto 5th Street, and I could see the warm glow of Mario's restaurant ahead. Relief flooded through me. "I'll have someone take care of your car," Antonio said as we pulled to a stop. "Where do you live?" I hesitated, the question feeling invasive. "For the car," he clarified, though I suspected he already knew the answer. I gave him my address, a rundown apartment complex on the east side of town. "Salvatore will drive you home after your shift," he stated, brooking no argument. "That's not necessary. It's raining. It's dangerous. And you have a daughter waiting." His tone left no room for debate. "I insist." As Salvatore opened the door for me, Antonio reached into his jacket and produced a business card. Simple, cream-colored cardstock with just his name and a phone number embossed in black. "If you need anything, Sophia, anything at all." I took the card, our fingers brushing momentarily. His were warm despite the rain. "Thank you," I said, not knowing what else to say. As I stepped out, Sheltered by Salvatore's umbrella, Antonio called after me. "Sophia?" I turned back. "Life has been unkind to you. Perhaps that's about to change." With that cryptic statement hanging in the air, the door closed, and I was left standing at the entrance to Mario's, clutching a stranger's business card and wondering if I'd just been rescued or ensnared. What I didn't know then was that Antonio Russo never did anything without purpose, and he just decided that I, for reasons I couldn't begin to fathom, had become one of his purposes. The moment I stepped into Mario's, something felt different. The usual chaotic energy of the Friday night dinner rush had an undercurrent of tension. Eyes darted toward me, then quickly away. Conversations hushed briefly before resuming with forced casualness. Marco, the head waiter who had never spared me more than irritated instructions, rushed over immediately. "Sophia." His voice was pitched higher than normal. "We were worried about you." I blinked in confusion. In the 3 months I'd worked here, no one had ever worried about my whereabouts. I was just another replaceable waitress, one of many struggling single mothers willing to work late hours for cash tips. "My car broke down," I explained, still clutching Antonio's business card in my damp palm. "I'm sorry I'm late." Marco glanced at the windows, toward where the black SUV had been moments before. "No apology necessary. These things happen, yes?" His smile seemed strained. "Your section has been covered. Why don't you dry off in the back and take tables 15 through 20 when you're ready?" I stood frozen, unable to process this unprecedented display of accommodation. Usually, being an hour late meant automatic termination, or at minimum, a night without tips as punishment. "Is everything okay, Marco?" "Of course. Everything is perfect," he insisted, too enthusiastically. Go, take your time." I made my way to the employee locker room, aware of the whispers that followed me. In the harsh fluorescent light, I caught my reflection in the mirror and winced. My hair was a disaster. My mascara had created dark smudges beneath my eyes, and my scrubs, though no longer dripping, clung uncomfortably to my skin. From my locker, I pulled out the spare uniform I kept for emergencies. As I changed, Lucia, one of the other waitresses, entered the room. "So," she said, leaning against the lockers with poorly disguised curiosity, "you arrived in his car." My hands stilled on the buttons of my white blouse. "Whose car?" Lucia raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Don't play dumb, honey. Antonio Russo's car. The Antonio Russo." The way she said his name, part awe, part fear, confirmed my suspicions from earlier. "My car broke down," I repeated carefully. "He happened to drive by and offered me a ride." Lucia laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Antonio Russo doesn't happen to do anything, and he certainly doesn't pick up stranded women on stormy nights like some kind of dark knight." I finished buttoning my blouse with trembling fingers. "Who is he exactly?" She stared at me as if I'd asked who the president was. "Seriously? You've been working here for months and don't know?" She lowered her voice to a whisper. "He owns half the city, legitimate businesses anyway. The other half..." She made a vague gesture. "Let's just say when the Russo family offers protection, smart people accept." My stomach tightened. The gun beneath Salvatore's jacket suddenly made more sense. "He's Mario's cousin," I said, repeating what Antonio had told me. "Second cousin," Lucia corrected. "But in the family, blood ties are everything, even distant ones." She leaned closer, her voice dropping further. "What did he want with you?" "Nothing," I insisted, suddenly defensive. "He just gave me a ride." Lucia's expression made it clear she didn't believe me. "Well, whatever it is, be careful. Men like him don't do favors without expecting something in return." Her warning followed me as I finished getting ready and headed out to the dining room. The restaurant was busy, the warm lighting and soft Italian music creating an atmosphere of casual elegance that belied the apparently darker connections lurking beneath. As I approached my assigned section, I noticed that table 16, usually reserved for walk-ins, was cordoned off with a velvet rope. A small, reserved sign sat in the center. Marco intercepted me before I could ask. "The Russo table is always kept ready," he explained in a hushed tone. "Even when he's not expected," I nodded, processing this new information as I began serving my other tables. Throughout the night, I felt eyes on me. the staff watching with newfound interest, perhaps wondering what connection I had to their powerful patron. I did my best to ignore it, focusing instead on providing impeccable service and earning the tips I desperately needed. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Garcia, my elderly neighbor who watched Emma while I worked. Emma had nightmare. Calling for Mama. Everything okay, but thought you should know. My heart squeezed. This was the third nightmare this week. The doctor said it was normal after everything she'd been through, but knowing my daughter was frightened and I wasn't there to comfort her made me feel like I was failing at the one job that truly mattered. Everything all right? I nearly dropped the phone at the unexpected voice. Turning, I found Mario himself standing behind me, his usual stern expression replaced with something almost like concern. Yes, it's my daughter, I explained, surprised he was speaking to me at all. In 3 months, our interactions had been limited to him barking occasional orders or criticizing my wine-pouring technique. Is she unwell? His bushy eyebrows drew together. Just a nightmare. My neighbor is watching her. Mario nodded thoughtfully. Children should be with their mothers, especially at night. He studied me for a long moment. You've worked hard tonight, yes, despite your car troubles? I nodded, confused by his sudden interest in my work ethic. Good. You can finish your shift early. Family comes first. I stared at him in disbelief. But I still have 2 tables. Lucia will cover them. He made a dismissive gesture. Your tips will not be affected. Before I could thank him, he walked away, already calling for Lucia. I stood rooted to the spot, trying to make sense of this unprecedented turn of events. The answer came as I was collecting my things from the locker room. Marco appeared in the doorway, his usual haughtiness replaced by something resembling respect. Your ride is waiting, he said. My ride? Mr. Russo's driver, Marco clarified. He's outside. The memory of Antonio's insistence that Salvatore would drive me home surfaced. I'd assumed it was just a polite offer, not an actual arrangement. That's really not necessary, I protested. I can take the bus. Marco looked genuinely alarmed. The bus? At this hour? Out of the question. Mr. Russo was very clear about your transportation. Very clear. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with implication. I got the distinct impression that Marco had received direct instructions regarding my welfare. Besides, he added with a tense smile, it's still raining. Indeed, when I stepped outside, the storm hadn't abated. And just as promised, the black SUV was parked directly in front, its engine idling. Salvatore stood beside the rear door, umbrella at the ready. Ms. Mills, he greeted me with a formal nod. You really don't have to do this, I said, even as he shielded me from the rain with the umbrella. I can find my own way home. Salvatore's expression didn't change. Mr. Russo's instructions were explicit. I hesitated, scanning the empty street. The last bus would have left 20 minutes ago, and a taxi would cost at least half of tonight's tips. With Emma waiting at home, the practical choice was clear. Thank you, I conceded, sliding into the back seat. I expected to find Antonio there, but the car was empty. I wasn't sure if I felt relief or disappointment, and that confusion troubled me. As we pulled away from the restaurant, I noticed Salvatore watching me in the rearview mirror. Is there something wrong? I asked, suddenly self-conscious. No, ma'am. His eyes returned to the road. Mister. Russo asked me to ensure you arrived home safely. Does he do this for all Mario's employees? Salvatore's expression remained professionally neutral. I wouldn't know, ma'am. The lie was obvious, but I didn't press. Instead, I gazed out the window, watching raindrops trace patterns down the glass as we drove through the deserted streets. What about my car? I asked suddenly, remembering. It's still on Westridge Road. It's been taken care of, Salvatore replied. Mr. Russo arranged for it to be towed to Angelo's garage. Angelo's? But that's the most expensive shop in town. I can't afford... The repairs have been covered. I sat up straighter. What? No, that's too much. I can't accept Ms. Mills. Salvatore interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. When Mr. Russo offers assistance, it's best to accept graciously. The implication was clear, and it sent a chill through me despite the car's warmth. This wasn't charity. It was... What? A favor that would need repaying? An investment in something I didn't yet understand? Why me? I asked quietly. Why is he doing this? Salvatore's eyes met mine briefly in the mirror. It's not my place to speculate on Mr. Russo's motivations. We rode in silence for the remainder of the journey. When we reached my apartment building, a dingy complex with peeling paint and security doors that hadn't worked in years, I felt a flush of embarrassment. The sleek black SUV looked obscenely out of place against the backdrop of poverty. "Thank you for the ride," I said, reaching for the door handle. "One moment, please." Salvatore's voice stopped me. He exited the car, circled around, and opened my door. Umbrella extended. The formality of the gesture felt surreal in my neighborhood, where survival trumped courtesy. He escorted me all the way to the building's entrance, where I punched in the code that hadn't been changed in years. "Good night, Ms. Mills," he said, handing me a business card identical to Antonio's. "If you need anything, day or night, please call this number. It reaches me directly." I accepted the card, adding it to the one Antonio had given me earlier. "Thank you, Salvatore." He nodded, then hesitated. "May I offer a personal observation?" Surprised, I nodded. "Mr. Russo is a man of honor. Whatever his interest in you, it comes from a place of respect." With that cryptic statement, he returned to the SUV. I watched until the taillights disappeared around the corner, then hurried up the stairs to Mrs. Garcia's apartment. The elderly woman greeted me with a tired smile. "She just fell back asleep, pobrecita," she whispered, leading me to her couch where Emma was curled up beneath a crocheted blanket. My daughter's face, even in sleep, bore traces of tears. Her dark curls, so like her father's, were damp with sweat, and she clutched her stuffed rabbit with white-knuckled intensity. At 4, she'd already endured more uncertainty than any child should. "Did she say what the nightmare was about?" I asked, gently gathering her into my arms. Mrs. Garcia shook her head. "Just kept asking for her papa, same as last time." The familiar guilt twisted inside me. Emma barely remembered her father, but the absence was a wound that wouldn't heal. How do you explain to a child that the person who should love her most in the world had chosen to abandon her? "Thank you for watching her," I said, balancing Emma's sleeping form as I dug in my purse for Mrs. Garcia's payment. She waved it away. No, not tonight. You keep it." I started to protest, but she silenced me with a grandmotherly pat on the cheek. "I saw the car that brought you home," she said, eyes twinkling with curiosity. "Very fancy. New boyfriend?" "Just a ride," I insisted, heat rising to my cheeks. "My car broke down." Mrs. Garcia's knowing smile suggested she didn't believe me. "Well, he must be somebody important. Those cars, they don't come cheap." "Good night, Mrs. Garcia," I said firmly, ending the conversation before it could venture into territory I wasn't ready to explore. Back in our tiny one-bedroom apartment, I tucked Emma into the bed we shared, then took a moment to survey our home. The furniture was second-hand, the decor sparse, but everything was clean and functional. It wasn't much, but it was ours, a sanctuary cobbled together from the wreckage of broken promises. On the nightstand beside me, Antonio's business card caught the light. Such a simple object, yet it seemed to pulse with potential. For what? I wasn't sure. Help or harm? Salvation or complication? I changed into an oversized t-shirt and slid beneath the covers next to Emma, who immediately nestled against me, seeking warmth and security. As I held her, I thought about Antonio Russo, his penetrating gaze, his commanding presence, the power that seemed to radiate from him. "You're safe with me," he'd said. The words echoed in my mind as sleep finally claimed me, pulling me under into dreams where dark eyes watched from shadows, and promises hung like stars just out of reach. Morning arrived with watery sunlight filtering through our thin curtains. Emma woke first, her small hands patting my face with the unrestrained affection of childhood. "Mama, wake up! It's pancake day," I groaned playfully, pulling her into a hug. Saturday mornings were sacred, the one time each week I could guarantee I'd be fully present for her. We had a ritual: pancakes shaped like animals, cartoons on our secondhand TV, and no rushing to get out the door. "What kind of pancake do you want today, sweet pea?" I asked, kissing the top of her head. "Elephant," she declared, bouncing on the mattress. I laughed. "Elephant is pretty advanced. How about a teddy bear? She considered this with adorable seriousness. Okay, but with chocolate chips for eyes. Deal. As I mixed the pancake batter, I realized I felt lighter than I had in months. Despite the drama of the previous night, or perhaps because of it, I'd slept deeply, without the usual anxiety dreams about unpaid bills and looming deadlines. My phone buzzed on the counter, an unknown number. Your car has been repaired. New alternator, oil change, brake check. Ready for pickup at Angelo's whenever convenient. AR. I nearly dropped the phone into the pancake batter. How had he gotten my number? I hadn't given it to him. Before I could respond, another text arrived. Keys at front desk. Bill settled. I set the phone down, my hands trembling slightly. The repaired car was a relief. I needed it desperately, but the ease with which Antonio had inserted himself into my life was unsettling. He'd found my phone number. He'd arranged repairs without my consent. He'd settled what must have been a substantial bill. The implications were both comforting and terrifying. I was being looked after by someone with significant resources and influence. But why? And at what cost? Emma's impatient call for pancakes pulled me back to the present. I forced a smile and returned to our Saturday routine, determined not to let these new complications spoil our precious time together. Hours later, after Emma was engrossed in a coloring book, I finally replied to the text. Thank you for your help, but I can't accept such an expensive gift from someone I've just met. Please let me know how much I owe you for the repairs. I can set up a payment plan. The response came almost immediately. It's not a gift. It's a necessity. You need reliable transportation for work and your daughter. No payment necessary or accepted. I stared at the message, torn between gratitude and unease. The practical part of me, the single mother who counted every penny, recognized the value of what he was offering. The suspicious part, the woman who'd learned the hard way that nothing comes without strings, wondered what the catch might be. As if sensing my thoughts, another message appeared. Have dinner with me tonight, 8 p.m. I'll send Salvatore. Not a request, a statement of what would happen. I bristled at the presumption, even as a flutter of something dangerously like anticipation stirred in my chest. I can't. I have my daughter. Again. His response was immediate. Bring her. I'd like to meet her. The suggestion caught me off guard. Men I'd dated in the past had viewed Emma as an inconvenience, a complication to be worked around. None had ever expressly asked to meet her. I stared at my phone, Antonio's invitation glowing on the screen. Bringing Emma to dinner with a man I barely knew, a man who was by all accounts dangerous, seemed reckless, and yet something about the straightforward way he'd included her gave me pause. I don't think that's a good idea. We hardly know each other. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Several seconds passed before his response arrived. Fair enough. Another time, perhaps. The car offer stands regardless. No strings. The absence of pressure surprised me. I'd expected insistence, perhaps even manipulation. The respectful retreat made me reconsider my immediate refusal. Thank you for understanding. And for the car. I set the phone down, relief mingling with an unexpected twinge of disappointment. Part of me, a part I wasn't ready to examine too closely, had been curious about what dinner with Antonio Russo might entail. Mama, look! Emma's voice drew my attention. She held up her coloring book, proudly displaying a purple elephant with orange polka dots. It's beautiful, like your dress. I smiled, momentarily confused. Which dress, sweetie? The pretty one. The one in the box. I followed her pointing finger to our front door, where a large white box tied with a black satin ribbon sat innocuously. A box that definitely hadn't been there earlier. Heart racing, I approached it cautiously. There was no shipping label, no indication of how it had arrived. I lifted it, surprisingly heavy, and brought it to our small dining table. Can I open it? Please, please. Emma bounced excitedly beside me. Let me check what it is first, I said, carefully untying the ribbon. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a dress of deep burgundy silk. As I lifted it, the fabric cascaded like liquid, catching the light in rich, warm tones. It was elegantly cut, with a modest neckline and 3/4 sleeves, beautiful without being overtly sexy. Beneath it was a smaller box containing a pair of black leather heels that looked Italian and expensive. A card rested at the bottom, heavy cream cardstock with a handwritten note in bold, confident strokes. For when you're ready. No expiration date. A.R. I sank into a chair. The dress pooled in my lap. The gesture was presumptuous, intrusive even. He'd somehow learned my address, my phone number, and apparently my dress size. The level of information gathering was unsettling. And yet, the dress was perfect. Not flashy or revealing, but the kind of elegant simplicity I'd admire in store windows, knowing I could never afford it. The kind of dress that said its wearer deserved to be seen, to occupy space, to be taken seriously. "It's so pretty." Emma reached out to touch the silk reverently. "Are you going to wear it to the princess ball?" I laughed despite myself. "What princess ball? The one where you meet the prince, silly." She twirled around the room, lost in her 4-year-old fantasy. If only she knew the man who'd sent this dress was more likely to be a villain in those fairy tales than a prince. And yet, I carefully returned the dress to its box, my mind racing. The lack of pressure in Antonio's messages, combined with this gift that came with no expiration date, suggested patience. He was making his interest clear while giving me space to decide how to respond. It was manipulative in its own way, but showed a level of respect I hadn't expected. My phone buzzed again. "Your car will be delivered to your address by 5 p.m. today. Keys with the attendant." I typed quickly. "How did you know where I live?" The response came immediately. "I know many things, Sophia. It's both my business and my protection." The honesty was refreshing, if unsettling. No pretense, no apology. "The dress is beautiful, but I can't accept it." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Keep it. Wear it when you choose, if you choose. Or don't. It's yours regardless." I set the phone down, uncertain how to respond to generosity that left me no graceful way to refuse. The dress represented something I hadn't had in a long time, a choice that wasn't constrained by necessity, a luxury I couldn't justify but desperately wanted. "Mama, can we go to the park?" Emma asked, already pulling on her jacket. "You promised." I welcomed the distraction. "Yes, let's go." The community park was only a few blocks away, a small green space surrounded by aging apartment buildings. It wasn't much, just a set of swings, a slide with peeling paint, and a sandbox. But to Emma, it was a kingdom of possibilities. As she raced toward the swings, I scanned the area out of habit, noting the other parents, the teenagers lounging on benches, the general safety of the environment. Nothing seemed amiss until my gaze landed on a black sedan parked across the street, its windows tinted. It could have been coincidence. There were probably dozens of black sedans in the city, but the prickle along my spine suggested otherwise. I watched Emma play, pushing her on the swings when she asked, catching her at the bottom of the slide, but part of my attention remained fixed on that car. It never moved. No one entered or exited. It simply remained, a dark presence at the edge of my awareness. After an hour, Emma's energy finally began to wane. "I'm hungry, Mama. Let's go home for lunch," I agreed, taking her hand. As we walked back toward our apartment, I couldn't resist glancing over my shoulder. The sedan was gone. In its place was a different vehicle, a dark SUV that looked unsettlingly familiar. My pace quickened, Emma struggling to keep up with my longer strides. "You're walking too fast," she complained. "Sorry, sweet pea." I forced myself to slow down, to appear calm, despite the unease crawling beneath my skin. Back in our apartment, I locked the door and peered through the blinds. The street below appeared normal. No suspicious vehicles, no men in suits watching our building. I was being paranoid. Antonio had helped me during a crisis, repaired my car, and sent a dress. Unusual behavior, yes, but not necessarily sinister. Yet the rumors about who he was, what he was, lingered in my mind. The afternoon passed quietly. Emma napped, then watched cartoons while I caught up on laundry and bills. At precisely 5 p.m., a knock came at the door. Through the peephole, I saw a young man in coveralls holding a set of keys. "Delivery from Angelo's garage," he called through the door. I opened it cautiously, chain still in place. "Yes?" "Your Honda's in the lot, ma'am, all fixed up." He extended the keys through the narrow opening. "Mr. Russo said to tell you they replaced the alternator, changed the oil, and did a full inspection. Should run good as new. Thank you, I said, taking the keys. Did he mention how much it cost? The young man looked uncomfortable. It's all taken care of, ma'am. Mr. Russo's instructions. I nodded, having expected as much. Thank you. After he left, I stood by the window, looking down at the parking lot where my old Honda now sat, looking cleaner than it had in years. The windows gleamed in the late afternoon sun, and even from a distance I could see that the dent in the passenger door, a souvenir from a hit-and-run in a grocery store parking lot, had been repaired. My phone buzzed with a text. Not Antonio this time, but Lucia from the restaurant. Heard you got the Russo treatment. Lucky girl. You working tonight? I'd forgotten it was Saturday. My usual shift. Yes, coming in at 6. Her response was immediate. Marco says you're off the schedule. Paid leave. Boss's orders. I stared at the message in disbelief. Paid leave? I'd never even had unpaid leave. There must be a mistake. I need the hours. No mistake. Marco said Mr. R was very specific. You're covered for a week, full wages, plus average tips. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. This was crossing a line. Car repairs were one thing, but interfering with my employment was another level entirely. I dialed the number from Antonio's card before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the second ring. Sophia. My name in his accented voice sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. You can't do this, I said without preamble. Do what, exactly? His tone was calm, almost amused. Interfere with my job. I need those hours. I need to work. You need rest, he countered. You work 2 jobs. You're exhausted. Your daughter needs you present, not depleted. The accuracy of his assessment only fueled my anger. That's not your decision to make. You don't know anything about my life or what I need. A pause. Perhaps not everything, but I know enough. His voice softened. The leave is paid, Sophia. You won't lose a penny. Consider it a gift of time. I don't want gifts. I don't need charity. Not charity, he corrected immediately. Respect. For a mother working twice as hard as she should have to because a man failed in his responsibilities. The reference to Emma's father caught me off guard. How do you know about that? People talk, especially when I ask questions. The implication sent a chill through me. He'd been making inquiries about my life, my past. Why? I demanded. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had a different quality, softer, more intimate. Have dinner with me. Not tonight. Tomorrow. Just us. And I'll explain everything. I should have refused. Every instinct for self-preservation urged caution, and yet... Just dinner? I verified. Just dinner, he confirmed. I'll have Salvatore pick you up at 7. Mrs. Garcia has already agreed to watch Emma. That pushed me back over the edge. You spoke to my neighbor? Before even asking me? I made contingencies, he admitted unapologetically. If you had refused, no harm done. That's invasive. Presumptuous. Yes, he agreed simply. It's also efficient. His candor was disarming. No pretense, no attempt to soften his methods. I don't understand you, I said finally. Tomorrow, he promised, 7 o'clock. After a moment's hesitation, I agreed. Tomorrow. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Who are you talking to, Mama? Just a... friend, I said, ending the call. About grown-up stuff. She accepted this with a child's easy faith, climbing into my lap for a cuddle. As I held her, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, I wondered what I was getting myself into, and whether I was putting the most precious thing in my life at risk. The next day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. I cleaned our apartment, played with Emma, and tried not to think about the evening ahead. At 6, I finally opened the box containing the burgundy dress. The silk was cool against my skin as I slipped it on. It fit perfectly, skimming my curves without clinging, the color warming my pale complexion. I hadn't worn anything this beautiful since... maybe ever. Mrs. Garcia arrived promptly at 6:30, her eyes widening at the sight of me. Dios mío! You look like a movie star. Emma spun in delighted circles around me. Mama's going to the princess ball. I knelt to her level, suddenly overwhelmed with doubt. I don't have to go, sweet pea. I can stay home with you. No. She shook her head emphatically. You have to go meet the prince, if only life were as simple as her fairy tales. I hugged her tightly, inhaling her scent, drawing strength from her innocent belief in happy endings. I'll be home soon, I promised. Be good for Mrs. Garcia. At precisely 7, my phone buzzed with a text from Salvatore. Outside whenever you're ready. With a final glance in the mirror and a deep breath to steady my nerves, I stepped out into the unknown. The restaurant wasn't Mario's, as I'd half expected, but a place I'd never been, an exclusive establishment on the top floor of the city's tallest building. The maitre d' greeted Salvatore by name and led us directly to a private elevator. Mr. Russo is waiting, he said with deference. The elevator ascended silently, floor numbers lighting up in sequence. My stomach fluttered with each passing floor. Nerves, anticipation, or perhaps both. First time? Salvatore asked, his usual stoicism briefly giving way to something like kindness. I nodded, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the silk dress. You look lovely, he offered, surprising me. Mr. Russo will be pleased. Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened directly into a private dining room. The space was intimate yet luxurious. Dark wood, cream-colored walls, soft lighting from crystal chandeliers. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights below. And there, silhouetted against the glittering skyline, stood Antonio. He turned as we entered, his expression transforming from polite expectation to something more intense. His gaze traveled from my face to the dress and back again, a slow, appreciative assessment that made my skin warm. Sophia, he said, crossing the room with measured steps. Thank you for coming. Up close, I noticed details I'd missed during our rain-soaked first encounter. The precision of his tailoring, the subtle silver at his temples that softened his otherwise dark hair, the scent of his cologne, cedar and something warmer, like amber. The dress was made for you, he observed, his eyes holding mine. You mean I was measured for it, I corrected, unable to keep the edge from my voice. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. A reasonable assumption, but incorrect. I have an eye for proportion. The way he said it made heat rise to my cheeks. I glanced away, taking in the rest of the room, the single table set for 2, the bottle of wine already breathing, the absence of any other diners or staff. Are we alone? I asked, suddenly aware of Salvatore's departure. The staff will bring each course, then leave us to our privacy, Antonio explained, guiding me toward the table with a light touch at the small of my back. I thought it would be more comfortable for our conversation. He held my chair, waiting until I was settled before taking his own seat across from me. The table was small enough that we could speak quietly and still be heard, yet large enough to maintain a proper distance. Wine? He offered, already reaching for the bottle. Just a little, I said. I'm driving. His expression flickered. Actually, I assumed Salvatore would drive you home. I have my own car now, remember? I raised an eyebrow, thanks to someone's interference. He poured the wine, a deep red that caught the light like liquid garnet. Not interference, investment. In what, exactly? I challenged, meeting his gaze directly. Antonio studied me for a moment, seeming to appreciate my directness. In potential. Before I could press further, the first course arrived. Delicate plates of something that looked more like art than food. The server described each element in reverent tones, then disappeared as quietly as he'd come. I waited until we were alone again. You promised explanations. Antonio took a measured sip of wine, then set his glass down with deliberate precision. I did. But first, tell me about Emma. The request caught me off guard. My daughter? Why? Because she's important to you, and I want to know what's important to you. Something in his tone, a genuine curiosity perhaps, made me consider his request. She's 4, smart, stubborn, loving. She sees the good in everyone, like her mother, he observed. I laughed, the sound sharper than I intended. I'm not sure about that. Life has made me cautious. With good reason, it seems. Antonio's expression darkened. Her father, He took more than money when he left. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. He took her security, her trust. I stared into my wine glass. She still has nightmares about him leaving, even though she barely remembers him. Antonio's jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath the skin. Some debts deserve to be repaid. There was a threat in those words that should have frightened me. Instead, I felt an unexpected surge of vindication. His name is David Mercer, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. He disappeared 6 months before Emma was born. Emptied our joint account, $12,000 we'd saved for the baby and medical bills. I took a steadying breath. Last I heard, he was in Seattle with his new family. Antonio nodded once, his expression unreadable. He made no notes, asked no follow-up questions, but I had the distinct impression that David Mercer's days of consequence-free abandonment were numbered. The second course arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the intensity of our conversation. When we were alone again, Antonio steered the topic in a different direction. "You're working 2 jobs," he stated. "Nursing during the day, waiting tables at night. Both physically demanding, both underpaid." I bristled slightly. "It's honest work." "I wasn't criticizing," he said, his tone softening. "I was expressing admiration and concern." Concern. "You're exhausted, Sophia, running yourself into the ground to provide for your daughter." He leaned forward slightly. "What happens if you get sick? If you're injured? What happens to Emma then?" The question hit a nerve, one of my deepest fears. "I manage." "You survive," he corrected. "There's a difference." I set down my fork, appetite fading. "What's your point, Antonio?" He considered me for a long moment, dark eyes assessing. Then, with characteristic directness, "I want to help you." "Why?" I challenged. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he countered. "I know you're intelligent, determined, and fiercely protective of your daughter. I know you've been dealt a bad hand and are playing it as best you can. And I know you deserve better." His certainty was unsettling. "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Antonio smiled. A real smile this time, one that reached his eyes and transformed his face from merely handsome to something almost breathtaking. Direct. I like that. He took another sip of wine. "What I get is the satisfaction of knowing I've made a difference, of using my resources for something worthwhile." I wasn't convinced. "That's all?" His expression shifted, something darker entering his gaze. "For now, yes. I won't lie to you, Sophia. I find you compelling. But my help doesn't come with expectations or demands. Everyone wants something," I said, the bitterness of experience coloring my words. "True," he acknowledged. "But sometimes what they want isn't what you fear." The main course arrived. Perfectly cooked steaks, roasted vegetables, sides I couldn't name. Again, the server appeared and disappeared with professional discretion. "So, what exactly are you offering?" I asked when we were alone, cutting into the most expensive piece of meat I'd ever been served. "Financial security," Antonio replied simply. "An apartment in a safer neighborhood, a college fund for Emma, healthcare beyond what your insurance covers." He held up a hand as I started to protest. "Not charity. Consider it a scholarship of sorts." "In exchange for?" "Your time occasionally, dinners like this, conversations." I narrowed my eyes. "Just conversations?" His expression remained impassive. "I'm not proposing an arrangement of the kind you're implying, Sophia. Whatever develops between us, if anything, would be separate from my financial support." The distinction was important, but still unsettling. Why me? There must be dozens of struggling single mothers in this city. Antonio set down his knife and fork, giving me his full attention. "Because from the moment I saw you, soaked to the skin, crying beside that broken car, but still with a core of steel that wouldn't bend or break, I knew you were extraordinary." The intensity in his eyes made it difficult to breathe. "You don't know that. You don't know me." "I know enough," he repeated. "I know your supervisor at the hospital describes you as the most dedicated nurse on the floor. I know Mario says you never complain, never miss a shift. I know Mrs. Garcia says Emma is the most well-adjusted child in the building, despite everything." The extent of his investigation should have alarmed me. Instead, I felt a strange combination of flattery and resignation. Of course, he'd done his homework. Men like Antonio Russo didn't operate on impulse or emotion. "I need to think about this," I said finally. He nodded, unsurprised. "Of course. Take all the time you need." The rest of dinner passed with lighter conversation. Antonio asked about my nursing career, sharing that his mother had been a nurse before her marriage. He spoke of his childhood in Sicily, his migration to America as a teenager, his early struggles to assimilate. He revealed pieces of himself strategically, I suspected, building a foundation of commonality between us. By dessert, a decadent tiramisu that melted on my tongue. I found myself relaxing despite my reservations. Antonio was intelligent, surprisingly funny, and a good listener. In another context, another life, I might have considered him the perfect dinner companion. "It's getting late," I said eventually, glancing at my watch. "I should get back to Emma." Antonio nodded, immediately signaling for the check. Of course, family comes first. The phrase, simple but weighted with sincerity, struck me. In my experience, men viewed my daughter as competition for my attention, an inconvenient reminder of another man's presence in my life. Antonio seemed to genuinely respect my maternal priorities. As we rode the elevator down, standing side by side in comfortable silence, I found myself studying his reflection in the polished doors. The strong profile, the confidence in his posture, the subtle signs of power in his bearing. Dangerous, yes, but perhaps not to me. In the lobby, Salvatore waited discreetly by the entrance. At Antonio's nod, he stepped outside to bring the car around. "I had a lovely evening," I said, the politeness feeling strangely inadequate after the intensity of our dinner conversation. "As did I." Antonio took my hand, his thumb brushing lightly across my knuckles. "Think about what I said, Sophia. No pressure, no deadline." I nodded, suddenly unable to form a coherent response with his hand holding mine. "May I call you tomorrow?" he asked, releasing my hand. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how quickly I agreed. Something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. "Good night, then." The drive home was quiet, Salvatore maintaining his professional distance. As we pulled up to my apartment building, I noticed a new security guard stationed at the entrance, one I'd never seen before. "Mr. Russo's arrangement," Salvatore explained, following my gaze, "for the building." "He hired security? For the whole building?" Salvatore nodded. "Starting tonight. 24-hour coverage." I stared at him in disbelief. "Why would he do that?" "Because you and Emma live here," Salvatore replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I sat in stunned silence for a moment, trying to process the implication. Antonio had already begun intervening in my life, not just with gifts or car repairs, but with substantial changes to my living situation. "I haven't agreed to anything yet," I said. Salvatore's expression remained neutral. "The security remains regardless of your decision." As I exited the car, he handed me a small box from Mr. Russo, for Emma. Inside was a stuffed rabbit, identical to the one my daughter already treasured, but was falling apart from years of love. A replacement, ready when needed. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, small but meaningful, affected me more deeply than the expensive dress or dinner. Upstairs, I found Mrs. Garcia and Emma both asleep on the couch, a children's movie playing softly in the background. As I gently lifted my daughter, she stirred but didn't wake. "Sweet dreams, little one," I whispered, carrying her to our bed. As I changed out of the beautiful dress, Antonio's offer replayed in my mind: financial security, a safer home, a future for Emma, all in exchange for what, exactly? Companionship? Conversation? There had to be more to it. Men like Antonio Russo didn't invest in strangers without expecting returns. And yet, as I slipped beneath the covers beside my sleeping daughter, I couldn't deny the temptation. Not just for the material security, but for the protection Antonio represented. In a world that had shown me its harshest face, the promise of safety, even from a dangerous man, held a powerful allure. "You're safe with me," he'd said that first night. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to consider that I might not have to face everything alone. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Emma's small hand patted my cheek. "Mama, wake up. Tell me about the prince," I groaned playfully, pulling her close. "What prince?" "From the princess ball," she insisted, her eyes wide with excitement. "Did he have a castle? And horses?" I laughed, smoothing her tangled curls. "No princess ball, sweet pea. Just dinner with a friend." "Was he handsome?" she pressed, undeterred. The image of Antonio's intense gaze flashed through my mind. "I suppose some people might think so," Emma nodded sagely. "Like in my stories, the prince is always handsome. If only life were as simple as her fairy tales, where handsome meant good and power was always used nobly. Antonio Russo might look the part of a prince, but I knew enough about his world to recognize he was something far more complicated. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Antonio. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." Such a normal message, as if from any potential suitor. It was easy to forget, in these small moments, what I knew about who he was. I set the phone aside without responding, focusing instead on our Saturday morning ritual. Pancakes, cartoons, and no rush to be anywhere. These simple moments with Emma were precious, untainted by the complications of adult life, by the choices I now faced. Later, as Emma napped, I finally allowed myself to consider Antonio's offer: financial security, a safer home, a future for Emma. The practical benefits were undeniable, especially with my car breaking down and medical bills from Emma's last bout of strep throat still unpaid. But accepting meant connecting my life, and my daughter's, to a man whose business dealings operated in shadows, a man who, despite his personal charm and apparent interest in me, was feared by everyone who knew his name. I needed more information before I could decide. My phone buzzed again. Not Antonio this time, but Lucia from the restaurant. "Girl, what did you do? The boss is walking around like someone died. And Marco keeps staring at your empty tables like they're haunted." I frowned, typing quickly. "What are you talking about?" "Word is Russo himself ordered your paid leave. But there's something else going on. Mario's all weird and jumpy." A chill ran down my spine. "Weird how?" "Like he's scared. Really scared. Something about his cousin and family business getting mixed up. He was on the phone all morning, speaking Italian super fast." I set the phone down, unease coiling in my stomach. Antonio had said his offer came without strings, but clearly, my absence from Mario's had created ripples. Ripples that had frightened my boss. What was I missing? Before I could consider further, my phone rang. Antonio's number. "Hello?" I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Sophia." His voice was warm, intimate. "I was wondering if you'd like to join me for a drive this afternoon. With Emma, of course." The inclusion of my daughter, again, caught me off guard. Most men avoided single mothers' children like a contagious disease. "A drive where?" I asked cautiously. "There's a property I'd like to show you. A potential new home for you and Emma." My grip tightened on the phone. "I haven't agreed to anything yet, I know," he said, his tone patient. "This is just for your consideration. No pressure, no decisions today. Just information." I hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution. "We could stop for ice cream afterward," he added. "I'm told there's an excellent parlor near the park." The normality of the suggestion, ice cream, a park, was disarming. Like something a regular man might offer on a Saturday outing with a woman and her child. "All right," I agreed finally. "What time?" Would 3 o'clock work, after Emma's nap? The fact that he knew my daughter's schedule was both thoughtful and unsettling. 3 is fine." "Excellent. Salvatore will pick you up. And Sophia?" "Yes?" "Thank you for your trust. I don't take it lightly." After we hung up, I sat motionless, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Involving Emma in whatever this was between Antonio and me felt like crossing a line, and yet, if I was seriously considering his offer, she would be affected regardless. At precisely 3, Salvatore arrived in a different vehicle than usual, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows but less intimidating than the one I'd first seen. Child-appropriate, I realized. Emma was wide-eyed with excitement as we approached. "Is that a princess car?" Salvatore's usually stoic expression softened as he opened the door, revealing a booster seat already installed. "For the little signorina," he said with a formal nod that made Emma giggle. "I'm not a signorina," she corrected, climbing in. "I'm Emma." "Of course. My apologies, Emma." The formality with which he addressed my 4-year-old was both amusing and touching. We drove for about 20 minutes, leaving the crowded streets of our neighborhood behind for progressively more upscale areas. Emma chattered excitedly about the big houses and pretty trees, while I grew increasingly nervous about our destination. Finally, we turned into a gated community, stopping at a security booth where Salvatore exchanged a few words with the guard. The gate opened, and we proceeded down a tree-lined street with elegant townhouses on either side. "Wow." Emma pressed her face against the window. "Mama, look at the flowers." The landscaping was indeed beautiful. Mature trees, manicured lawns, and carefully tended flower beds. Every property looked immaculate, screaming of privilege and security. We pulled into the driveway of a cream-colored townhouse with black shutters and a red door. Antonio was waiting on the front step, dressed more casually than I'd seen him before. Dark slacks and a light blue button-down shirt. The sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms. When Emma saw him, she whispered loudly to me, "Is that the prince, Mama?" I suppressed a smile. "No, sweet pea. That's Mr. Russo, my friend." As we exited the car, Antonio approached, his focus shifting immediately to Emma. Instead of the awkward uncertainty most adults display around children, he crouched to her level, extending his hand. "You must be Emma. I'm Antonio. It's a pleasure to meet you." Emma, usually shy with strangers, placed her small hand in his with surprising confidence. "Do you live in a castle?" He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "No, just a regular house, but I thought you and your mother might like to see this one. It has a special room just for little girls." Emma's eyes widened. "For me?" "If you'd like it," he said, glancing up at me with a question in his eyes. I nodded slightly, giving permission for the tour while reserving judgment on what it might mean. The townhouse was beautiful, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, with an open floor plan and large windows that filled the space with light. The kitchen was a chef's dream, the living room cozy yet elegant, and the master bedroom suite larger than our entire current apartment. But it was the smaller bedroom that Antonio showed us last that took my breath away. Painted a soft yellow, with built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking a small garden. It was exactly the kind of room I'd always wished I could give my daughter. "This would be Emma's room," Antonio said softly, watching my face. Emma had already raced in, spinning in delighted circles. "It's so big, Mama. Look at the window. I could see stars at night." I swallowed against the sudden tightness in my throat. "It's lovely." Antonio moved closer, his voice pitched for my ears alone. "The school district is excellent. There's a playground 2 blocks away, and the security in this community is top-notch. All the things a mother worried about. All the things I couldn't provide in our current situation." "Why are you doing this?" I asked, the question barely audible. His expression grew serious. "Because you deserve it. Because Emma deserves it. And because I have the means to make it happen." "But why us? Why me?" Antonio was quiet for a moment, watching Emma explore the built-in window seat. "Sometimes," he said finally, "we recognize value that others have missed. I recognized yours the moment I saw you. Soaking wet, exhausted, but still fighting. Still standing." The sincerity in his voice was difficult to doubt. "I don't know if I can accept this," I admitted. "It feels like too much." "Consider it an investment," he suggested. "In Emma's future. In yours." "And what do you get from this investment?" His dark eyes met mine, something intense and unguarded in his gaze. "The satisfaction of knowing I've made a difference. And perhaps in time, something more. But that's not conditional on this." He gestured to the house around us. "This is yours regardless of how you feel about me." The distinction was important, but still unsettling. "I need time to think." "Of course." He nodded, stepping back to give me space. "Ice cream? I believe I promised Emma." The ice cream parlor was charming and old-fashioned, with checkered floors and red leather booths. Emma was immediately enchanted, her excitement growing when Antonio told her she could choose any flavor she wanted. As she deliberated with the seriousness only a 4-year-old can bring to ice cream selection, I observed Antonio. He was patient with her indecision, genuinely interested in her opinions, and showed none of the condescension adults often display with children. When a drop of chocolate ice cream landed on his clearly expensive shirt, he laughed it off without a trace of annoyance, and when Emma shyly offered him a taste of her sprinkle-covered creation, he accepted with the gravity the exchange deserved. It was unexpected. All of it. The beautiful house that could be ours. The ease with which he interacted with my daughter. The absence of pressure or expectation. As we ate our ice cream, Emma regaled Antonio with stories about her preschool adventures and her favorite stuffed rabbit. He listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. "Mr. Antonio," she said finally, chocolate smeared across her cheek, "are you going to be my mama's prince?" I nearly choked on my ice cream. "Emma," Antonio's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "That would be entirely up to your mother," he told her seriously. "But I would consider it a great honor if she thought me worthy." His gaze met mine over Emma's head, and the sincerity there made my heart stutter. This wasn't just charm or manipulation. Something more genuine lived beneath the surface of Antonio Russo than I had initially believed possible. By the time Salvatore drove us home, Emma had fallen asleep in her booster seat, exhausted from the excitement of the day. As we pulled up to my apartment building, I noticed the new security guard nodding respectfully as we passed. "I'll have Emma," Antonio said softly, unbuckling her with surprising gentleness and lifting her into his arms. She snuggled against his chest without waking, instinctively trusting in a way that both warmed and worried me. In my apartment, he carried her to the bedroom, laying her down carefully on the bed. I covered her with a blanket, brushing a curl from her forehead before turning back to Antonio. In the small living room, he seemed too large, too powerful for the space. His presence filled the room, making our modest furnishings seem shabbier by comparison. "Thank you for today," I said, suddenly awkward. "The house is beautiful. It could be yours," he reminded me. "Whenever you're ready." I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze directly. "I need to know exactly what you want from me." Not the polite version, the truth. Antonio considered me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then, with characteristic directness, "Eventually, everything. Your time, your trust, your heart." He stepped closer, not touching me but near enough that I could feel the heat of his body. "But I'm a patient man, Sophia, and I understand the value of what I'm asking for." The honesty was both terrifying and refreshing. "I can't make any promises," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He nodded, accepting this. "I'm not asking for promises, just a chance to prove myself worthy of your trust." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "The house is yours whenever you want it. No strings, no expectations. The choice is entirely yours." After he left, I stood motionless in the center of the living room, his offer echoing in my mind. A new home, financial security, a future for Emma, and perhaps in time, something I'd given up hoping for. A partner who saw my strength rather than my vulnerability. A man who valued my daughter as much as he valued me. It was a risk. Antonio Russo was dangerous, powerful in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. His world operated by different rules than mine. But as I looked around our tiny apartment, at the water stain on the ceiling, and the lock on the door that didn't quite catch, I thought of Emma's delighted face as she twirled in that sunlit yellow bedroom. "You're safe with me," he'd promised that first night. And against all logic, against every lesson life had taught me about trusting men who made grand promises, I believed him. The next morning, I texted a single word: "Yes." His reply came immediately: "I'll send Salvatore at noon. Welcome home, Sophia."